So I've been working on a memory overclocking video, and what we're going to be covering is performance scaling as it pertains to temperatures of the memory chips. Now, in the process of making this video, my community bought me this infrared thermal imaging camera thing. And when I was stress testing my memory, I took the thermal camera and went over my whole board with it, my motherboard, to see the temperatures, and I found some interesting things. So this video is the first part of a two-part series of memory thermal videos. Now, let me show you what I found with the thermal camera first. Then we're going to come back and I'm going to explain to you what the goal of this video is and what we're trying to achieve. Okay, so here's the test board here. It's just a regular old Apex with a custom contraption here for the cooling. But these two sticks are just stock G-Skill. They're the 48 gigabyte kit, I want to say 24 gigabyte sticks, and they're just the stock heat sinks, right? Okay, so we've only been stress testing the memory here for 7 minutes, okay? Now, if you go over here, the memory is almost hitting 70 Celsius. We're at 68 and 69 Celsius, right? Now, here is kind of the first indicator that you can kind of tell that something is wrong, right? The PCH is almost 70 Celsius as well. The PCH has no business being that hot. It doesn't need to be, right? So something here doesn't look right. 70 Celsius on the sticks and 70 Celsius on the PCH. So let's go see what's going on. Okay, so here is the new thermal camera. Thank you, supporters, for buying this for me. This entire channel is run by you guys. Now, so we're just going over the board here. This part at the bottom is the aluminum heatsink connected to the PCH, the chipset, right? So you can see the part that's directly over top of it here is about 50 Celsius-ish, right? Now, if you see that little red dot at the top left, it's detecting almost 80 Celsius at the board, right? So then I move the sensor over to confirm, and then it actually starts kissing 70 Celsius, right? So as you can see, the motherboard itself is actually hotter than the memory chips. The heat is kind of getting trapped in between that chipset and those DIMM slots there. So the goal of today's video is we're going to try and reduce those memory temperatures by doing everything we can around the motherboard that's not replacing the memory heat sinks themselves. Now, replacing memory heat sinks can be a very daunting task for not so technically savvy folks. So this video is for you guys. Can we reduce memory temperatures without changing the heat spreaders on the sticks? So we're going to try 3 things in this video to try and reduce the overall motherboard temperature, resulting in a reduced memory temperature. The first thing that I'm going to try is I'm going to try and replace the thermal pad or the thermal paste on the chipset heatsink to try and get that heat to absorb upward and not downward into the board. So let's go do that first, see if we can get any kind of improvement. Okay, so it's been 10 minutes now since I recorded that little part, and the memory is at 73, 72, so it's just getting worse and worse and worse. So we'll cut it there. 10 minutes is good enough. 10 minutes, 73, 72. Let's go change the chipset heatsink and see if that makes a difference. So I'm going to take this cover off and check this out, actually. So this doesn't actually attach to the chipset heatsink at all, right? It's just metal on metal there. So I wonder if actually we can get a thermal improvement if we put a thermal pad here to soak up some heat from this thing. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here a little bit, right? But so if this goes on here, why not put a thermal pad right here to absorb some of that heat? Maybe we'll do that too. So we take the chipset heatsink off next. Looks like it's like a 2mm thick thermal pad. Let's see what I got here. So I've got some leftover critical thermal pad here. This is 20 watts per whatever. This is a 1mm. So that should help kind of absorb those chipset temps a little bit. So let's put this on. Okay, so now I'm going to put this back on. I'm going to clamp it all down and then take it off again to make sure that's actually making contact, right? No, it didn't actually make contact. So I guess you have to use a 2mm or maybe a 1mm and some thermal paste. I'm gonna try that actually. Okay, I'm not gonna take it off again. I checked underneath and I can see the thermal paste gushing out, so I know it's making contact now, right? So next thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna take these thin thermal pad slices and I'm gonna put them all along here to transfer heat over to this bigger plate. Alright, so I have no idea if this will actually do anything. I'm just full YOLOing for this part. So let's throw it back together and then run it for 10 minutes again. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes on test number 2, and the changes, yeah, wow. We dropped about 9 Celsius on the PCH, and then that dropped our memory temperatures by about 5 Celsius. So that actually worked out much better than I thought it would have. So maybe about every 8 Celsius drop on the PCH is about a 4 or 5 Celsius drop on the DIMMs, just from that radiating heat not getting transferred over to them. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna try is I'm gonna try and actually undervolt these two PCH voltages. Now, undervolting the CPU itself also reduces the heat throughout the entire board. Also, having a backplate on the motherboard helps too, but the Apex doesn't have a backplate. But anyway, I digress. You'll know if you've undervolted these too far if your USB ports start cutting off or your network adapter starts getting packet loss or any of that. You know, when things start being weird, you know you've undervolted these too far. So let's try and just do it a little bit and then we'll see what happens. So I'm not really too sure. I guess we'll start with a 0.02 undervolt. So 1.03 for that one and then 0.8 for that one. See what happens. Okay, so 10 minutes again after undervolting the chipset. Kind of a nothing burger, really. It didn't even reduce the PCH temps at all. Like, this the exact same. DIMM temps are pretty much the exact same. So undervolting the chipset was pretty much a nothing burger. I mean, I should say not really worth losing your USB ports and stuff for basically no change whatsoever. Now, there are a couple of more things that we could do here. Now, people in the comments might be like, Jufus, why don't you just put a fan on top of them? Yeah, that'll fix all your problems, basically, right? But the thing is, we're going to assume the person wants to keep their aesthetics, right? Want to have your RGB RAM without some ugly fans strapped over top of them, right? That's the whole point. Let's try a fan on the back of the motherboard where it's completely out of the way and unseen. See if that drops the memory temperatures at all. So I'm going to leave this running. We're going to go over there and put a fan on the back and then see if it actually drops like real time. Okay, so this is going to be pretty janky. I just kind of lifted up the motherboard off the desk here, okay? We're still doing 15 minutes now and the memory just hit 70, so it's still climbing after 15 minutes, right? So now I'm gonna take this fan, just blow it on the back, and then let's see what happens. So I'm just gonna hold it like this, right on the back of the CPU socket here. The idea is here, you can always get a fan behind your motherboard inside of your case, right behind the actual motherboard tray. So let's hold it here. Oh my god, this is really difficult with one hand. So it's actually not dropping the RAM temperatures as much as I thought it would. Okay, I've been holding this here for 3 minutes now. Alright, so we're at 20 minutes now on the test, and the memory temps are 65. So we dropped about 5 Celsius from having a fan on the back for 3 minutes. So that's really good. So you don't need a fan on the front to do this. Okay, last test. Let's take the fan and just kind of rest it on top, just in case you actually did want to do it this way. Now, there also is this thing here. I don't make videos on this anymore. This is the old Corsair RAM fan. These things were always so goated, but Corsair discontinued them. If you can find one, this will solve all your problems, obviously, without having to change the heat sinks and all that. But yeah, Corsair doesn't make this anymore, so there's no point in making videos on that anymore. But that thing basically does the same thing as this. It just looks a lot clearer, right? which is super weird because we need this thing more than ever with DDR5, and I have no idea why Corsair stopped making this. Corsair, if you're watching this, get this thing back, man. Okay, yeah, so it's been 2 minutes with that fan on there, right? And we're already down to the 40s, so that's tough to beat, right? That thing, the fan on top dropped by 15 Celsius. Now, the reason why the fan shows more of a gain than anything else, like the chipset heatsink and all that stuff, is because the motherboard is sitting on a desk, right? There's no actual case airflow at all. So that fan adds airflow to the entire motherboard, right? It's not just the memory. So this test would have actually been better done inside of a case with regular airflow, right? But changing the PCH heatsink in a case is a nightmare, right? Yeah, it's actually still going down. Now we're at almost 45, right? So with 45 Celsius on your DDR5 sticks, you can get a really good overclock out of those things. So this is actually also why it's so hard to stabilize DDR5 on ITX boards, right? So if you look at an ITX board, this is the Z690 Unify, there's nowhere for the heat to go from the chipset and the RAM and the CPU. It all gets soaked in. Now this one was actually the best or actually still is. This still is to this day the best DDR5 ITX motherboard because it has that back plate on it, right? This absorbs more heat than the Z790i Edge because the Z790 doesn't have this back plate. It's just bare PCB, right? So if you're using a Z790i Edge, you definitely want the fan on the back at least. You can't get these anymore either, but this is obviously the GOAT. So to summarize then, my Apex motherboard might have actually been defective from the factory because you should not have 70 Celsius on your PCH temperature. So if your memory is unstable and you're looking at your PCH temperature and it's also really high, same with your memory, go ahead and try and fix that first before doing anything else. You always want your components to run nice and cool for longevity as well, right? So even though you can fix the problem with a fan, I would still go in there and change that PCH thermal pad. So then, let's say you fix the PCH, you got a fan on the back, and your memory temperatures are still too high, or you still want more overclocking headroom, but you don't want to put a fan in the front. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to actually take the heat sinks off of a stock DIMM, and then you can replace it with a nice heatsink like this, and that'll drop your temperatures even further. If you replace the heat sinks, you get really cool memory, you get good overclocks, and you get to keep your entire aesthetic for your build without an ugly fan on the front. So thank you to the supporters for buying me this infrared camera. This was an invaluable tool in discovering this little whole PCH issue here. You're gonna see a lot more content in the future with this thing, but in the meantime, I hope you learned something today, and if you like the content, hit that subscribe button, do all that YouTube SEO stuff, like, share, subscribe, comment down below how you fixed your overheating memory, and I will see you guys in the next one. Talk to you later.